Hello, folks. It is Sunday yet again. This time it's April 21st, and normally today I would do a test review. But if I'm being perfectly honest, last week was not a productive week for testing. And here's why. I made some progress on some prospective clients, making proposals, things like that. And I also ran a workshop and planned for that and all that fun stuff. So a lot of my attention went to that stuff. And some of those are connected to ancillary tests that I have that I haven't really shared here. And so I don't really have much to show you this week in terms of tests. But what I wanted to share a little bit is something that's been on my mind, which is a card that David Hall and I wrote in Strategy Tactics for our PIP deck. If you don't have a copy of Strategy Tactics, you can always get one at getstrategytactics.com. There's a link to that in the description. But the card that I want to talk about is the one called Take Responsibility. And this card is for those moments when just a lot of stuff is happening and it feels important and it feels like it's happening too fast, and you might consider it a crisis or a slow motion train wreck, even a fast motion train wreck. But what do you do in those moments? And this is the card David and I wrote to address those circumstances. So it's about holding the space for doing what must be done in order to lead the people in your care through difficult no-win situations. So sometimes there is no easy answer. There is no right answer, but you have to show up anyway, especially when there are people in your care. We chose that language too because we don't really like the language of managed or report to or any of that very hierarchical stuff. We think if you are in a position of leadership or authority, you ought to think about the people who you're responsible for as people in your care, as opposed to people that you control or tell what to do and things like that. There are two kinds of main components to this card. The first one is a frame of mind around who's responsible in a situation. And the second thing is more like what to do. And the frame of mind about who's responsible, I think, is really important because if you look on the back, there's this diagram at the top. And the diagram has this kind of spectrum from who's responsible, no one, me, we, you, or them. And this is to help us understand like which frame we're defaulting ourselves into. Like by default, is no one responsible? This looks like withdrawal. Like it is what it is. There's nothing that can be done. Just completely abdicating any responsibility in the situation. And that response doesn't really work a lot of the time. It's kind of a hopeless or helpless. Learned helplessness is a phrase that I've heard sometimes for this, but it's a withdrawal from responsibility. When it's me, when I'm responsible, it's about control, as in, let's do it my way, or I'll do it myself, or I've been learning that sometimes I want to have control in a situation. I want to be able to decide what to do, when actually that's not quite the right way to deal with it. Maybe I'm not alone, and so I need to share that responsibility with others. And sort of like on the other side of the spectrum, there's like them, they're responsible. They did this to us. They did this. They should clean it up. Another version of this is you're responsible. I'm not taking responsibility. It's your responsibility. So this tends to be a little bit blamey. And if you're in like a management or leadership position, doing that to someone else saying you're responsible, it can often end up being neglect because maybe the person isn't responsible because the environment had a lot to do with what they did, or your policies, your training, your guidance is what got them in this position in the first place. And it's just a lot less messy to leave them on their own to figure it out. And what we propose is this we responsibility, which comes from a place of care. And good care is hard. It's very difficult because in caring professions, good outcomes are not always possible. And yet you have to do the best you can with what you have. And this card actually comes from a book called The Logic of Care by Anne Marie Moll. And what she describes as good care is this persistent willingness to come back to the situation and ask, what must be done? And not just to yourself, but with others that are in the situation. What must be done? Okay, we're in this situation. These are the problems. These are the factors. What must be done? Okay, yeah, I know all that hurts and it's really painful, but what must be done? And it's, I think, very closely related to some of the ideal present stuff that Dr. Joshua Bloom, now he got his PhD, by the way, mentions with the ideal present. So that's the kind of frame, the mental frame that I think is helpful, is like we take responsibility, and that looks like holding the space for figuring it out, what must be done. Now, in terms of what to actually do, I've had a lot of experiences, and so has David, where it's high pressure and it feels like it's crushing you, and you could panic, you could freeze, you could get stuck. But the things that we've found helpful for getting through those difficult situations are, first, getting out of quick reaction mode. Because if you're not literally escaping a burning building, then there is in fact time to think. And you need to get yourself out of a reactive, no thinking, reaction mode and get into thinking mode. And that requires having a little bit of space. So the first step is to create that space. Hey, we need to not make things worse. And so we need to switch from doing to thinking. That's how we'll see our way through this mess. Once you've declared that, the next step is to buy yourself some time, basically. You can't think clearly under pressure. And just saying that you need to get into thinking mode isn't going to do it. So what we recommend is getting clear on how long you have until things erupt into a full-blown catastrophe. And yes, it may already be a full-blown catastrophe, but like, think about how long you have until things get worse, and significantly worse. Like, it's uncomfortable now, but how long until it becomes absolutely catastrophic? And get real about that. Is it going to be minutes? Is it going to be days? Is it going to be months? Knowing that information can help you say, okay, this is how much time we have to think and to do our best. And that can create a goal. We're going to figure things out by that point, and whatever we have at that point is what we're going to have to go with. So what you can do to buy yourself some more time then is, once you've identified the sort of the next moment of consequences, is to look for workarounds. Look for temporary kind of measures or quick fixes, things that you can have in your back pocket or you can deploy immediately to buy yourself some time. You also want to be communicative with the people who are impacted by the situation, especially those who are experiencing the negative consequences. And the point is not to have the answer for them. And it's not even to say, we are certain that it will be fixed by this time or whatever. It is to reassure them that you are on it, that your attention is on it, that you're aware of how it's impacting them. And frankly, you do need to set their expectations. If you don't set expectations, people will set their own expectations and then hold you to them. And that's just not going to work, right? So what you need to do is set some expectations that give you enough time to deal with the problem. And oftentimes it can be just as simple as, we will tell you when we know more, and we will absolutely check in by 2 hours from now or by tomorrow. Just giving them the next thing to look forward to. That's not when it'll be fixed, but it is definitely when we will tell you what we know. We're working on it. So reassuring and good communication are important. So once you've done those kinds of preparatory activities, then the next step is to struggle through it. And really you have to get everybody in the room or on the call or what have you. And the goal is to focus on care, which is, again, using Anne-Marie Moll's view of this, persistent attention to doing what must be done. Also, while avoiding the temptation to withdraw, to give up to the situation, to lean into that helplessness, avoiding control, like we're going to do it my way or the highway, and also avoiding neglect and blame, like you figure it out or it's just their fault, which is, woe is us. for this happening. There's nothing we can do. It's their fault. So avoiding those temptations and staying locked in on what must be done. What must be done? And so the guiding questions that David and I propose here is like, yeah, first of all, what must be done? But we think some supplementary questions are good too, like how can we reduce the harm that people are experiencing? And the other one I think, which is really helpful, is how can we make it right? If there's harm, if there's mismatched expectations, if there's a problem, how can we make it right for the folks who are in the situation? And then really it just comes down to deciding what to do and doing it. And I think a useful question here is, what can we live with? It's not going to be perfect. We're not going to have the right answer. But what must be done can lead us to what actions can we take that we can live with. There's this quote from Donna Haraway on the front. And it says, "Our task is to make trouble, to stir up potent response to devastating events, as well as to settle troubled waters and rebuild quiet places." And so I think if we are responsible, if we care, if we focus on doing what must be done, then how can we stir up that potent response? How can we rebuild the quiet place once again? And it's going to take time, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be perfect, but what must be done? Thanks for sticking with me today. I know normally this is a test review, but I thought it was important to share something that's been on my mind, and I'd like to hear how you use this card, how you use this idea of taking responsibility in order to stir up that potent response. What quiet places will you rebuild this week? All right. If you'd like a copy of Strategy Tactics and you don't already have one, you can get 10% off using our link in the description, which is getstrategytactics.com. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. And I will see you again soon. Take care.